Start with my home state of Maharashtra, where, with politicians increasingly under heavy criticism for their VVIP culture, we've seen another example today of what can only be called Netagiri or Maharajgiri. This time it's the Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis who demanded special treatment on an early Monday morning flight. An Air India flight from Mumbai to New York was delayed by 50 minutes by the Maharashtra Chief Minister because, as you can see on his screen, P. Pardeshi, his principal secretary, arrived at the airport with his old passport, forgot the passport, so the Chief Minister decided to delay the flight till the bureaucrat's new passport was delivered to him. Okay, so that's what's happened in Maharashtra. I just want to get a sense of what this means. Is this classic VVIP culture, particularly when it comes to Air India? Joining me now, Jitendra Bhargava, former Executive Director, Air India. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Bhargava. Do you believe what the Maharashtra Chief Minister has done is a clear example of abuse of authority and misuse of power in the context of Air India in particular to delay a flight for 50 minutes because his secretary forgot his passport?
Yes, I agree with you, because had he travelled as a normal person, such a situation wouldn't have arisen. Let me explain why. Because this contingent was checked in by the protocol officers, the check-in staff did not look at the visa. Otherwise, for a normal passenger, when you present your ticket and before a boarding card is issued, the staff is expected to check the visa and the passport. Considering that US regulation clearly stipulates that the last point of boarding, and in this case Bombay was the last point of boarding, the documents had to be checked. Now why it did not happen, it remains, one can't explain. The second point is the Chief Minister's stand that look, either the entire contingent travels or the entire group is offloaded. I would salute the duty manager at the airport for one simple thing. He had the option offload all the 8 passengers and with their baggages, because the rules do not allow baggages to be carried without the passengers on board. That itself would have taken an hour. So he took the conscious decision, okay, we'll wait. But what is inexcusable is the way the bureaucrat concerned showed his irresponsibility. Imagine we as taxpayers, do we trust our bureaucrats? If a person traveling with the Chief Minister does not even know what kind of documents he's required to carry, this is simply not expected.
But just tell me one thing very simply, Mr. Bhargava. Had this been any other airline and not Air India, would the concerned Chief Minister or the bureaucrat had got away with it? Or is there a sense within our government that Air India jo hai, dare I use the word, hamari hi property hai, it's government property?
Rajdeep, let me clarify here. Any airline, whether it was an Indian carrier or a foreign carrier, would have weighed the options at the airport. Must I offload the passengers along with the baggages, and what amount of time will it take? Vis-a-vis the situation that I carry and I wait for the passenger to get the documents. This is where I said that I appreciate the duty manager's stand taken at the airport, because it would have taken much longer, considering that out of the 8 members in the contingent of the Chief Minister, there were some economy class passengers. Now, economy class passengers get into different kind of boxes in which the baggage is carried. If it was only a question of Chief Minister or the senior bureaucrats, it would have been in the first and business class containers, and it would have been easy to take out their baggage. But this is where you have to look at the operational aspect and the kind of stand a duty manager was expected to take in the situation.
Sir, but let's be very clear. The question I posed is, the fact is that bureaucrats and government, the mindset is that you can get away with much more if you are flying Air India than you fly any other airline.
That the minister is on record, civil aviation minister, that a flight should not be delayed for whatever reasons. Now, as I told you earlier, the question was on offloading a passenger or carrying it with the delay that is inbuilt into the system. He took the decision that was right. But what is not excusable is the way the bureaucrat behaved, and the Chief Minister took a stand. He could have easily said, okay, we will go along on the flight without the flight delay. Let the passenger follow in a flight an hour or two later, because there are umpteen number of flights going to the United States from Mumbai in the midnight hours.
Sir, but the fact is that, let's be clear, you say the minister, and I know that the civil aviation minister said don't delay Air India flights because a minister asks you to. But had an Air India official said, sorry Mr. Fadnavis, your senior bureaucrat must take the next flight, I cannot delay this flight, would that Air India official have survived?
Oh, Air India, in today's environment, Razi, thanks to you people, the staff is emboldened. They can take decisions in today's circumstances. Gone are those 10 years ago when a person at the airport would have been punished for not having obliged the political bigwig. But today the scenario is totally different.
Are you saying that had the Air India, are you really believe that the Air India official had told Mr. Fadnavis what the law of the land was, he would have still survived?
No, but yes, he would have told, but in fact he did tell them. When they apprised the Chief Minister of the situation, they were very categorical that this is an option. When the Chief Minister's response was unfortunate, when he said either the entire contingent travels or the entire contingent gets offloaded. In that circumstances, the duty manager took a call. If I offload, this is the quantum of time it will take to offload the baggages. Now, if I wait for the document, this is what is it. And one more thing, Rajiv, that needs mention here. Considering the quantum of delay that has taken place, leave aside the ATC delay that we are talking about, I can conjecture perhaps what the bureaucrats have done is to have sent the man from the airport to the residence to pick up the document, the passport, and bring it to the airport. Rather than call up the family and say, please send it to the airport, which would have saved half the time, and perhaps the flight delay could have been avoided to the extent it did.
Do you believe such instances are decreasing, Mr. Bhargava, or the VVIP still think they can get away? Do you believe that they are actually declining then?
I am at least very sanguine on this point that such instances have come down drastically, thanks entirely to the awareness that has been created by the media. Look at one situation, one stand taken by the Chief Minister, and the media has gone after him, which is just the thing people would love to see, and this kind of an attitude finished.
Let me ask you one final question then. Do you believe that Mr. Fadnavis today, he's on his way to the United States, he's probably reached there. Should he apologize to all the passengers for making them wait for 50 minutes or not?
I hope he had apologized on the public address system in the aircraft. That would have been the most logical way of apologizing, because apology is only one aspect. The second is the bureaucrat. Should we as taxpayers, citizens, trust a bureaucrat who cannot even carry his own documents for the travel he's undertaking, with no less a person than the Chief Minister of the state? How irresponsible can a person be?
I take your point. Strong words there from you, Jitendra Bhargava. Hopefully, Mr. Fadnavis and his team are listening to what you're saying. We've had just about enough of our VVIPs when it comes to Air India in particular. Okay, let's turn to the big international story, and it is really the top headline across the world tonight. Because in 2 hours from now, or a few hours from now, Greece is set to default on its International Monetary Fund loan. The country's finance minister has now said categorically that Athens will not be meeting tonight's deadline of its bailout debt. The country will therefore be defaulting its loan of 1.6 billion euros to the IMF. Greece facing a huge debt repayment of 242.8 billion euros, and if it defaults and decides perhaps to vote no against the referendum which has been called on Sunday, it could move out of the Eurozone, and that could affect the world economy. What exactly is this crisis about? Listen in.
It's Greece's race against time. Athens is to repay the International Monetary Fund a debt of 1.6 billion euro by 3:30 AM India time. But it is on course to miss the repayment. The Greek Prime Minister remains firm over opposing the bailout offer, hinting that he'd step down if Sunday's referendum backs the deal.
Την απάντηση θα τη δώσει ο ελληνικός λαός. Αν ο ελληνικός λαός θέλει να προχωρήσει εις το διηνεκές με σχέδια λιτότητας.
Here's what experts say Greece should be doing at this stage. Firstly, Greece needs to address its looming debt payments. It's worth noting that the repayment tonight is a part of a bigger debt that Greece has to repay to the International Monetary Fund and the European Central Bank by the end of 2015. Experts say Greece may need to secure another bailout package for repayment of its debt. The referendum slated for Sunday will decide whether Greece will stay on in the Eurozone. Importantly, July is when Greece owes the European Central Bank 3.5 billion euros. If it fails to repay the loan, Greece banks will be taken off life support.
The crisis was staring Greece in the face for years, especially after Europe's 2008 debt crisis. Greece's announcement that it had been understating its deficit figures for years shut it out from the financial markets, leading to bailouts by the International Monetary Fund, the European Central Bank and the European Commission, which it is now set to default on.
Έχουμε έρθει εδώ σήμερα γιατί πρέπει να πούμε στην κυβέρνηση και σε όλη την Ευρώπη ότι δεν πρέπει να κάνει πίσω τα μέτρα λιτότητας.
Μας είπε να μην προτιμήσουμε την αυτοκτονία επειδή φοβόμαστε το θάνατο. Δηλαδή μας ετοιμάζει το θάνατο. Μην αυτοκτονήσετε, θα σας καθαρίσουμε εμείς.
Back home, India is watching the situation closely, fearing some impact if Greece fails to repay the bailout debt tonight.
If Greece actually decides to exit the European Union, you could see this for the next 6 months, also 3 to 4, 6 months. In the short term, there would be a lot of volatility. Sentiments change in the global market. China clearly isn't doing well. So there is sort of those bout of risk aversion which enters into the global market. That happens and the Indian market is no different. We will also suffer from that.
With Greece's finance minister making it clear that Athens will not repay the debt loan, the country's Greek tragedy has just deepened. All eyes now will be on how it impacts the world economy. Bureau Report, India Today.
So what next and how will India actually be affected? Joining me now, Rhythm Desai, Managing Director, Morgan Stanley, joining me from Mumbai. Professor Kevin Featherstone, Professor of Contemporary Greek Studies at the London School of Economics, joining me. I'm going to come to you, Professor, first. Is it now a done deal in your view that A, Greece defaults later tonight, and B, will perhaps vote against the referendum, will decide perhaps to withdraw from the Eurozone rather than accept austerity measures?
Well, I think as your viewers know, Greece invented drama, and this week is certainly full of drama. There is news from Greece breaking this afternoon that in 20 minutes' time, the Euro group of finance ministers will hold a teleconference call to discuss the latest Greek proposal. And the latest Greek proposal is to have a short-term deal and then a two-year rescue package. We don't know the content of this proposed deal from Athens, but it is possible that something can be done which would avoid a default this evening to the IMF. A default which, as you say, could have major consequences.
That's interesting. That's interesting you're saying, Professor, of course, that Greece invented drama, and who knows, there may be a dramatic twist even before midnight tonight. But Rhythm Desai, as India and the rest of the world watches, what's the immediate short-term impact that you see should Greece default later tonight, and should they vote no in that referendum?
Well, Rajiv, as we have seen yesterday in the markets across the world, volatility is almost guaranteed. But, I would actually opine here that the world is a lot better prepared than it was for, say, the financial crisis in 2008. So this has been in the air for quite a while. Banks in Europe, for example, I think have reduced exposure to Greece. I think ECB is ready for a backstop. So I think the impact on markets probably will be limited. There are medium-term implications, of course, which we can go into, but what happens to Ireland, what happens to Italy, what happens to Portugal? Because any deal that is struck with Greece will have implications on all these countries that are as vulnerable, if not equally vulnerable as Greece is. So I think the market implications, well, we've seen kind of a trailer of that yesterday, but I would say it will be limited because there's been a fair bit of preparation in the event that Greece leaves defaults and leaves.
Capital outflows out of India may be hit. Software and engineering exports to the European Union may be hit. Fear of, as you said, volatility in the markets? Could the rupee depreciate? Are we, from an Indian perspective, relatively insulated, or will we also take a hit?
So Rajdeep, actually, if you go back to the summer of 2013, when we had the so-called Fed taper tantrum, India was very vulnerable. If you recall, there was a phrase coined, in fact, by Morgan Stanley called Fragile Five, and we put India into that basket. We know what happened to the currency then. And I think you hosted a TV show and I was part of it, and the rupee was at near 70 and there was a lot of panic. But I think 2 years onward, we have actually come a long way. Thanks to some really good central bank banking and Governor Rajan's credibility, a lot of work done by this particular government over the last 12 months. The fact is that India's current account is in near balance. Fiscal deficit is down 250 basis points. Real rates are up. Inflation is down. So the macro in India looks actually quite strong. And in fact, I would opine here that India is probably one of the less vulnerable countries in an emerging context to a Greece problem.
Let me get a final word from you then, Professor, there in London. The referendum comes on Sunday. Do you believe Greeks would prefer austerity and remaining part of the European Union? Or are they willing to risk the possibility of falling out of the European Union, not having the euro, going back to the drachma? Do you believe that that is a real possibility, that the majority of Greeks do not want austerity?
Well, I think the prospects actually would be for the referendum probably to say yes. How big a yes is very uncertain. But I would be surprised if the referendum led to a no. And this is because the government is saying that they wish to have a strong voice in the Eurozone. And I think people recognize that the referendum is a decisive point. It's the biggest choice that Greeks will make in a generation. But I think they recognize that staying in the Eurozone will mean some continued austerity. But they're making the calculation that the alternative is going to be worse.
Okay. We're going to leave it there. Obviously, all eyes on Greece, and that hasn't been the case perhaps since when? Since Alexander the Great, and that's a very long time ago. So clearly, Greece now at the center of world attention. Professor Featherstone and Rhythm Desai, pleasure having you join me here on the news today at 9. Meanwhile, back home, let's tell you some news that's breaking this evening. Setback to Narendra Modi's plans to push through the land acquisition bill, because sources are now telling us that that bill will not come up in the monsoon session of Parliament. The 30-member Joint Parliamentary Committee met today and has now sought a week's extension. They were supposed to submit a report on the first day of the monsoon session. Land bill is facing criticism even within the RSS Sangh Parivar. More RSS outfits, including the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, have claimed that the bill has been brought by the government contains unacceptable sections. That's what other RSS affiliates like the Bharatiya Kisan Sangh and the Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh have already told the Narendra Modi government. Let's go straight across. At the moment, Brajesh Pandey joining us. Brajesh, tell us very quickly, is it now certain that the government will not even push through, make any attempt to push through the land acquisition bill, particularly with the Bihar elections soon after the monsoon session?
Well, yes, Rajdeep, this looks a very clear possibility, because given the fact that government is not only facing a resurgent opposition vis-a-vis the Sushma Swaraj, Vasundhara Raje and Lalit Modi episode, they are also facing a very stiff opposition from all the Sangh affiliates, be it Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh or be it Swadeshi Jagran Manch or Bharatiya Kisan Sangh. They are very clear that the clauses which the government has introduced as amendment are not acceptable to them. There are certain clauses which the government feels should go away because it should favor industry, and these groups are vehemently opposed to that. And given the fact also that Bihar election is 2 to 3 months away from right now, it looks very clear that the government will try to postpone this land acquisition bill as much as possible, because it does not want to take any political risk as of now.
Okay, Brajesh Pandey, with that piece of breaking news, land bill likely not to be pushed through the monsoon session of Parliament.